Okay, you're all set to go.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining tonight. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to go through the first draft of the CFAC operating budget FY24 report. I sent that, and hopefully everybody got a copy of this a couple of days ago. What I thought we'd do is just kind of march through it, and the people who own the various sections can take the lead on discussing content, and we'll offer thoughts and suggestions. We'll make changes as best I can live and on screen. If there are, I had a page in a funny font in the beginning of the deck that I'm hoping people saw. Things like formatting and right-hand justification, I'm asking just trust me and I'll have it better looking for the next round. So I'm hoping tonight we can spend more on substance and content. And we'll worry about typos and formatting and everything in the next round after we've met with the DPW and the police and we have this thing in more buttoned up format. So if that's okay with everybody.
Yep. That sounds like a good plan.
All right. And let me see if I can do this without losing everybody. There it is. It's over there. Got it? Yes. Okay. So
Okay. No changes here.
okay. Lily,
Okay.
that's 1 for 1. I think my fortunes are about to reverse this. We don't need
Okay. You can roll on from that.
to roll on from my funny
Yeah.
fun.
Okay.
So I'll start since I did the intro and the methodology. I basically just took the same format we've had, updated the years, hopefully.
Right.
The overview, anything I have here in purple has been updated, and to Mark for looking at this section is now update. So all the numbers have been updated for the FY24 report.
So essentially what you did in the overview was just to bring it up to date for 24.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I'll think about getting creative in the next round, but I just wanted to get the substantive facts correct here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark, for your help with that.
No questions here for me.
Okay. Open budget again. I think I'm assuming, Mark, that we will have to update the links that are provided there so that like this says 22 budget 2022. I'm sure there's a new link, but I just assume that's a TBD that we'll do.
Yes, I can put the new link in there. The updated link.
All right.
Okay.
And then revenue was the same as the prior section. I did a little wordsmithing, but again, thanks to Mark's help, the numbers are now updated in the paragraph entitled projected revenue for FY24. So those should be updated numbers, and they should ultimately, when the report's done, tie into and foot to all the other references to these same numbers elsewhere in the report.
Okay.
So
No
this is
question there.
So these are updated numbers compared to what you sent out earlier, right?
They are correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
So the prior version had more black type and yellow.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
So everybody will be happy to know that me and my monotone are now done. We'll turn to the
So we're at general fund now.
section. Yep.
Okay.
So I don't know if I can't see everybody. Mark, is Jackie on the call?
Yes, she just joined us.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yes, I am.
Very good. So Jackie, if you're on, we'd like to just kind of walk us through the general fund section and talk about any thing that we should talk about and or any things that you have questions about.
I was not prepared to that. May I Okay. I basically what I did was just plug in the new numbers for
Mhm.
the fiscal year 24. The total revenue was 197,030,274. And I updated the table to reflect the 5-year fiscal change along with the percentage.
Yep.
Can we go down?
Yes,
Okay, so all of the other numbers that are there are just
will property taxes really be 77% of the general fund? Because in the paragraph, you say fiscal 24, taxes will provide 77% of the general fund, and then you have a paren, property
the
taxes,
percentage-
excise tax.
the
So then
percentage
the
last
next sentence
year-
says it's 77% of the general fund. Is that true?
The last year's percentage was approximately the same thing as well. So it seemed to be true. It seemed to be true based on last year and what was the tax?
I think last
rate?
year's property taxes were 72%. That's why if all of the taxes, property taxes, excise taxes, and motel, hotel taxes were 77%, I'm just wondering whether how the property tax would be 77%.
So
They can't both be the same.
So if I could just interject here,
Thank you.
percentages like that, all those numbers, I'm gonna have to go through this
Okay.
document
Yeah, okay.
just to do a quality check on all
That's
the
good.
numbers and
Thank you.
percentages, because we're still finalizing the budget. We're still
Right.
drafting the book, and
Right.
these things, it's very fluid. And once we get through it and finish it, we can transpose all the numbers that are in the budget book into your document, so to make sure that they're accurate.
okay.
That sounds
Mark,
fine.
Mark, can you confirm that the taxes were 153,794,995 and the state taxes were 29,263,174? Can you
I will
confirm?
confirm those numbers.
Okay, all right, because that was what I used to generate the information.
Okay.
Can we go back one line? The fiscal year 2023 approved revenue in the table,
Yes, yep.
it doesn't reconcile with the 24 growth. I think it was on March 13th, Mark, you sent out a general fund for 23 and 24 detail. That was instead of 193 million, that ended up being 100 and I believe 84 million.
Yeah,
Which
Yeah.
one's right?
184 is right.
Yeah,
Okay,
we need to
That-
change that.
Again, I'll have to go through this report and make sure you got all the right figures and percentages.
okay, so that will then support the 7.06% growth year to year. But one of them had to change.
The 193 was information that was on the table from last year.
Yes, I noticed that. And so maybe Mark, as Mark's saying, things seem to change. Is that somehow you got rid of $10 million last year, or 9, I guess, Mark?
It was an interfund transfer. We were grossing up interfund transfers previously. We're not doing that anymore. So it's just a change in accounting for interfund transfers.
Okay. So what you sent out on March 13th is something that we can use.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
okay.
Can I ask you guys a question?
Sure.
Down, I think the paragraph, you can't quite see the third paragraph. If we're talking about the general fund, it has the thing about the Kmart Plaza. Does that go into the general fund or doesn't that go into the airport enterprise fund?
Property taxes that are generated from those parcels out there is general fund revenue. The lease payments, the WS Development pays go into the airport enterprise fund.
Okay, so taxes go to the general. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
I think that in that paragraph that starts FY 24, 1, 2, 3, 4, the fifth line down where it's proposition 2, I think it's proposition 2.5.
Correct.
Okay,
And going back to that last paragraph about Vineyard Wind, have they started contributing those revenues or no?
They have.
they started in 23, didn't they?
I
Yes,
see
they
it
made-
says that, yeah.
Yep, and we actually just billed them for their fiscal year. They actually started in 22. The end of fiscal year 22 is when they made the first payment. We just billed them for their fiscal year 23 payment that's due under the host community agreement.
Okay,
So the future tense expected to is appropriate as we sit here. Because they haven't paid the bill yet.
That's right. It's
Okay.
not until mid-June.
Okay, okay.
Okay,
Any other thoughts and comments on this section?
The sections in red are sections that I am unsure about.
okay,
So a reserve for abatement and exemptions.
Yep, I'll provide those for you when we finalize the budget.
okay,
Okay. I will put that in. Bright red will be Mark.
okay.
I'll make a note just so everyone knows I'm actually colorblind, so I'm having trouble seeing the red and green differentiating. But
Can you see shading?
I can see it if I really look. It's hard for me. Just, yeah, the highlighting helps. for
Okay,
sure.
that's better.
And I'll highlight.
Thank you.
It is so nice to have a young man on here with seeing perfect. It makes us old people feel better. Thank you very much. Chris.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, there's more here.
Mhm.
Chris, let me do this.
That helps me. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it helps me too, Chris. Let's be honest.
Good.
Okay,
All right, so Mark will do the litmus test on all these.
yeah,
things.
Mark will bring it up to date.
Okay, any,
Actually, the last sentence in that paragraph that has just been highlighted in yellow.
Yep.
Is it true that Barnstable qualified for the first time? I'm not quite sure what that means.
That was language from last year. That needs to go away. Yeah, that was, we got $5.5 million in foundation aid for the first time last year. This year, we're getting another $6 million in foundation aid. It'll be
Right.
the second year in a row.
Yep.
so,
By the way, that comment about from last year probably applies in terms of the methodology, which refers to all the COVID stuff, and the very first paragraph of that might, all but the last sentence of that first paragraph probably doesn't need to be there. It's kind of repetitive and out of date.
Where are you?
And I'm way back at the beginning in the methodology thing. There's 2 paragraphs there, the first one of which talks about COVID and is probably historic at this stage. Oh, thanks for going. So if you go to the methodology
Right,
first,
right, I
paragraph.
see that.
The last sentence should probably be in the first paragraph, should probably go as the second sentence in the second paragraph, but the rest of it, I think, isn't needed for this year.
so take for this report, that sentence, put it here in front of town finance. director, Get rid of the first.
Right,
Right,
part.
right. The part about the COVID.
yeah,
Okay.
it's a small thing, but
Nope, that's
No, for this report, that's fine.
why we're doing this. Paste and delete. Before I hit delete, people are cool with that?
Yeah, I think that's outdated at this point.
Yeah,
Okay.
just take that out. And then say that we met with the school, DPW and police.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Good, Neil.
Thank you.
I forget that I'm the one doing this. I'm like, why isn't this person scrolling? And then I figured out it was me.
You're doing very well, Chuck.
You're a
Okay.
techno.
So this is where.
May I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Oh, hi, Chris. How are you?
But thank you. So I'm catching up here. What is foundation aid?
Foundation aid is a category of aid under the Chapter 70 state aid for education formula. So when your foundation budget goes up more than what your local contribution requirement is, they fill the gap with what's called foundation aid.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thoughts on what's on the page now? I think that's where we left off.
Are we at the expenditure part now?
Yes. and I'll-
Okay.
Actually, you have a typo in that prior paragraph before expenditure.
Okay, let me go back up.
It says a reduction in the FY 24 estimated budget for the regional school district came from.
Oh, yeah, FY.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go. Uh-huh. Okay.
In expenditures, the first paragraph, I believe there are a couple of numbers that are transposed where it says that fixed cost levels for fiscal year, which account for almost 24% of general fund. I believe that should be 33%. And where it says
So there was a total of 76%. 76% for the general fund.
no, I think it's the 24% should be 33% from the numbers we have. The remaining amount would be 67% instead of 76. And the municipal operations are actually 25%, not 34%, I believe.
Right, yes, that's right for the fiscal cost, because I did that section.
We'll-
The remaining
We'll put these in, right? If this is, and Mark will.
Keep
Confirm,
it honest.
yes. But it
Okay.
reflects what was said, correct?
Yeah,
Okay. Keep scrolling. To the end of the section.
let's see.
I like, for what it's worth, keeping the reference to COVID in this particular context, because, you know, my gut would be that a lot of the fallout from COVID and the things that have happened economically and with inflation and interest rates were driven by the response to the pandemic, and they continue to be things that challenge both the economy and the town going forward. So I like keeping this in here if people are comfortable with it.
I'm okay with it. I think it's appropriate in that context, at least for this year, maybe not next year.
Right, I mean, at some point, we need to.
It
get
will
on-
go away at some point, yeah.
Yes. But I think just given where, and part of this is contextual. Last year, for those of you who are new, and Lillian can correct me if I'm exaggerating, but we had a long debate about how much we should put, how much inflation should be a topic of our report.
Yeah,
That being a relatively small section at the end of the report. But I think because it was in there and because we closed with it and because we made it seem like it was a significant thing to think about, to just drop it, I think probably doesn't make a lot of continuity sense from a continuity standpoint. So I agree with you, Chris, assuming, you know, things are more normalized next year, we don't need to keep referring to COVID and its impact, but we cannot to add a new section, and I think we should at least reflect that.
I'm wondering though if we should use the word economic changes rather than growth, because changes would include both growth and inflation in that second line.
Here.
Yeah, I'm just throwing that out. Because since then, as you know, we dealt a lot with the difficulty of getting staff because of the costs. So I'm just thinking about a word that would incorporate both growth and inflation, changes in the economy.
So I get the concept, Lillian. What's the verbiage that goes in here?
I just put the word changes instead of growth.
I think I'll do it and then we can talk.
And then we could deal with it later, but I felt we needed to incorporate both aspects of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think we could still use a little wordsmithing, but point taken.
Oh.
Economic pressures?
Yeah, I think the disconnect for me here is we're basically saying, if I hit, do this, see if I can do this. Yeah. So I think what we were saying was COVID battered incomes, with incomes down, growth abated, and that abatement in economic growth had an impact on the budgets. It had an impact on everybody's budget. So if we want to change the concept to be kind of some multifaceted changes, I think we can do that. But then I think I need to change the sentence a little bit to make it sync with
Right.
the concept of changes. And I
Well,
will
why don't you highlight that and then we can figure it out next time.
do that, but I won't
Yeah,
put.
I think that'll be fine.
This will be my problem.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
The rest is fine.
Yep. So Jackie asked a question at the end here that I could not answer. I'll highlight this for Chris. So Mark, or A, I'm not sure I can answer the question. B, I'm not sure it's necessary, but question was asked.
Does that show up under debt service? Under fixed costs? That's a question.
I don't know if we lost Mark.
Yeah, no, I'm here.
yeah.
I'm not, I mean, the amortization of debt from the sale of bonds, we have hundreds of outstanding loans, and it's a very large schedule. We always include that amortization schedule in the budget document in the back. If you look at your capital improvement plan report that you've received, you'll find in the appendix the loan amortization schedules for all of our outstanding debt. I don't think you need it in this section of your report because we provide all the details. And these loans stretch out over, I think, 20 years currently.
Okay.
So we could remove this portion from this general fund report.
Yeah, and if we do that, I think the way Jackie has closed this section is perfectly fine.
Yes, I think it's fine.
All right, people are good with that?
Yeah. That basically follows the format we used last year.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Let me
Okay, Neil, you're up.
delete some of these. We have a blank page now.
Yeah, I'll take credit for that.
Yeah.
Go there. There we go. Okay, I'll fix the
Okay.
form, but Neil, this is your War and Peace, so
Yeah, it's long. One of the things I tried to do was incorporate what Mark suggested, was to try to give a little more insight into the Student Opportunity Act in Chapter 70, which, turns out to be, I think it's, this year, certainly it's hit a tipping point. Without Chapter 70, we'd lose $15 million of the school budget. It would have to be dropped, dramatically. So tried to do that, and that in nature makes it long. But started out therefore with a quick summary. What do you need to know if you were going to read 2 sentences? And people's feedback would be appreciated.
I thought this was extraordinarily well written. Somewhat emasculating for some of us, whose
I
egos are,
thought it was so thorough. You went through every aspect of the school budget.
Oh, not really.
Well,
I'm
this is
still
more-
learning.
This is more than we have ever had.
Yeah, it's long. And, I almost thought of thinking, all the other sections are 1 to 2 pages. Is this amount of detail going to get read, or should it be an appendix for those who are interested?
well, that was, I think that's exactly the right question, because that's the thing, as I read through this, that struck me was, it's a huge part of the budget. So to have it be, disproportionately large compared to the rest of the report makes sense from a budgetary standpoint. But I don't have context with whether the audience for this report will say, too much. We don't need all this, or if the audience will say, this is a big upgrade from what we've gotten from this committee in the past, and it's welcomed and encouraged. So, but I don't have context for that. So, but it was the big question that I had.
Well, in my opinion, I would think, more detail would be appreciated by whoever's reading the report. Your average citizen isn't necessarily looking at this report. It's only people who are interested in this data. So I think the level of detail would be appreciated, in my opinion.
I think it would be a first time that CFAC has had as detailed a report on the schools. And so I think it's very, very good.
I agree. And as I read through it's not fluff. I mean, there's actually,
It's hard. It's hard stuff. Yeah.
back in college, I used to write a lot in blue books when I had no idea what the heck I was talking about. This is not one of those cases. There's some stuff here. I would vote to keep it as is. And if people
I think so.
have said, I've got enough, they can just go to the next section, but we don't need to change the document.
No, I agree with you there.
Okay, so let me just plod through and see if especially from Mark, because as I'd mentioned to Lillian, I really would appreciate Mark looking at, and the school people even looking at this closely to make sure I haven't misrepresented. Because what I did here was I didn't just repeat their charts. I tried to go deeper than that to provide more insight. So anyways, relative to the details, we all know the budget is up 6 million, that the school has presented that. I think the thing that actually struck me was more than half the increase is actually due to COLA and salary steps. 3.4 out of the $6 million. the increase in FTE is accounts for $2.1 million to 35% of it, but it wasn't the biggest thing. It's the embedded inflation that's in the contracts. As schools told us, the staff is really mainly to support English language learners and economically disadvantaged students. And those are good in the respect that it's the thing that is driving a good piece of the Chapter 70 increase in aid that's coming from the state. We try to, in the chart there, show where the English language learners are increasing across the board, except actually in 12th grade for the most part. And one of the things that the school through Mark told me is that best case, according to the state, is it takes 6 years of good curriculum to get an English language learner out of the program. So this is a big slug for many years coming. It won't be just.
Excuse me, Chuck, could you roll to that chart, please?
Absolutely.
There you go. Thank you.
So a little misleading here actually is pre-K, which is 157. The way that's accounted for is that because it's a half day, they include it as a half person. So it's actually twice that. But you can see we've got a rolling for many years of English language learner resources are going to be required. The state increase in enrollment is up a little bit this year. I guess I'm skipping to page 8 here. But that's not the big driver. It continues to be consistently lower than it's been from 10 years ago. The state increase or the increase in Chapter 70 state aids, when you get underneath it, I was kind of surprised. The little table there, which explains the growth, the biggest thing that drove the $6 million increase was the reduction in the contribution to the foundation budget that the town needs to make now. It went from like 75%, which is in the footnote at the bottom of the page you can't see, to 70%. That was worth $3.8 million. Remember the histogram I sent out about 2 weeks ago after the meeting, the normal CFAC meeting, which showed that Barnstable had moved to the right, or it didn't show that, but it had moved to the right out of the lower level of contribution, and that surprised me. And I have not yet, and maybe Mark, is there a place I can go to figure out how to calculate that and where the data comes from?
For the foundation budget?
No, the thing that drove it was the contribution that the town needs to spend, not the foundation budget.
So, yeah, the contribution that the town needs to spend, what they do, Neil, is they take our previous year required local contribution.
Right.
They increase it by what's called a municipal revenue growth factor. And how they determine that is they look at all the other local receipts that a community generates from things like property taxes, motor vehicle excise taxes, and permits, and they come up with a percentage growth in local revenues. And for ours, for Barnstable, for example, I think it was about like 3.1% for fiscal year 23. And so they take our previous year local contribution, increase it by that municipal revenue growth factor. And then, since we are below our target local share contribution, they add to it an incremental increase in our local contribution to get us up closer to where they want us to be, which is 82.5%
right
of the total foundation budget. Okay, and I mean, these are some pretty sophisticated mathematicians that came up with this formula. And so therefore, our local contribution grew by about $3 million, the required local contribution.
Yeah,
The foundation budget grew by 9 million.
yes.
And so the difference
That's
is
the six, huh?
what
Okay.
foundation aid is, and that's the gap, and that's what the state provides for. And so, but that's going to change over time because they're going to keep hitting us with that incremental increase to get us close to the 82.5%. Right now we're around 70%.
Yes.
As far as the local contribution towards the foundation budget, they want us to get to 82.5. So the only way they can do that is to incrementally increase that local contribution over a multiple year period. But they don't want to do it immediately because of the financial stress that would place on a city or town if they were to do that. I mean, that would essentially say you have no revenue to do anything else if they're forcing you to provide it for education. So they recognize that in the formula that they've developed. So it's complicated.
Yeah.
I don't know if you really want to get into that level of, I mean, we could do a whole workshop.
Yeah, I think the thing that I took away from this, and I agree with you, not being a sophisticated mathematician, this is complex, and where you get the data from is not obvious even. But the fact that more than half the growth came from that one factor shows how variable things could be. It could have gone the other way, and that would have been a problem, because when you look at all the rest of it, they added 6% to the foundation budget dollars per pupil, so that added $1 million to what was last year's. We had a 12% increase in the number of total English language learners plus economically disadvantaged plus special ed pupils. That was worth 0.8 million. And then there was a 2% increase, the way the state calculates it, in the number of students that Barnstable is responsible for. And that was only worth $300,000. So that's how the $6 million was calculated, or what drove that basically. I guess the other point being made here is that the Chapter 70 aid is intended for the school's education budget, what the schools are expected to pay in total, which is partially the school's operating budget and partially a lot of what is about a third of what is in fixed costs in the way the budget is formed. So unfortunately, the $6 million that we talked about increasing in the school budget is not compensated for entirely by the $6 million. And I think that's why we wanted to try to make that clear in that paragraph. Did that come through?
I'm going to say yes. I'm not, I was waiting for, I'm going to say yes. I got the point.
Okay.
Yeah, I got the point too, Neil. I mean, Chapter 78 doesn't go to a school department, doesn't go to a school committee. It goes to the community.
Yeah.
And it becomes part of the overall general fund resources that a community can use when developing their proposed operating budgets for education and all other services. Since we spend well in excess of $90 million between direct operating expenses and those other costs you mentioned that are embedded in the fixed cost category. When we allocate all those fixed costs out to school operations, we're spending in excess of $90 million for public education.
Right.
When our foundation budget is 84 million.
Yes.
So
that.
even with throwing, we wouldn't have to provide one additional dollar for public education in fiscal year 24, and we would still meet our
Yes.
net spending requirements.
Although that gap,
Even though they gave us $6 million in Chapter 78. However, is that the right thing to do? especially when you have growing, EL populations and things. So that's why, we're trying to address the reasons behind the implementation of the Student Opportunity Act is to recognize these additional stresses that are placed on public education and provide some additional state aid to help implement programs and services to address those stresses that they're feeling.
Yeah, I certainly understand that, and a lot of the money from Chapter 70 is actually going to cover those school assessments and everything else, which is what they're meant to do,
Right.
which are not in the school budget. So, but I was concerned that if we're going to explain Chapter 70 to make it clearer to people, we need to make sure that they don't think that all of Chapter 70 is covering school expenses, because that's not the case.
No, 24 million out of an $84 million budget. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
I'm not sure, I would reword it a little bit to say.
yes, I
To say
I could
exactly
use
what you
help.
said at the beginning, that the Chapter 78 does not cover all of the school budget because, and then go on from there. Yeah. Because the crux of that whole issue is really the last sentence.
Right. And
Right,
actually, and we're going to go into that in more detail in the
Yeah,
next section.
right.
But I'll try to figure out how to maybe say that more clearly or in a shorter fashion.
All right.
Okay, so having tried to, having used up my 2 pages, so to speak, this is where I kind of kept going in terms of trying to be clearer on making, the more details and insight. The first thing is that the school operating budget is 63% of the educational spending. And it's been about that for the last couple of years. I've actually finally been able to put together a table that's pretty close that shows the total educational spending, so that the table at the top of page 9, if you go to that, I've got the dollars now pretty much what I need Mark's approval of, if they're correct. The only numbers that are actually correct are for 2022, which Mark sent me, which I think is the last time it all actually got rolled up, because it's an after the fact actual as you have, the town has to report. I understand, Mark, is that right?
Yeah, it's after the fact. 2022 would be the last end of year school report we filed, because we're not through 2023 yet. Is
Right.
that the source of your?
That's the 63% as labeled on this table. I backed into it from the data you gave us in the general fund, and assuming that the federal grants are about the same and such. So it goes from 116 million for total education spending, 116.5 million in 2022, and I think it's up to 120 million in 2024 on a projected estimated basis. But I think the point is that town appropriations make up a big piece of it. So that's what Chapter 70 also covers. The federal, and actually what was surprising to me is the amount of federal grants and the state aid for school nutrition is not insignificant, even if it's less than 10%. It's that school nutrition is $2 million a year. Which actually led me to one of the macro observations I had, which, coming out of the private sector and not having done this before, we are really dependent upon outside aid to cover a lot of these expenses. I just never understood that before. So for me, it was an epiphany. Relative to moving on to Chapter 70, this was just capsulizing the trends, showing the operating budget and the Chapter 78 have both been increasing. They both increased at $6 million in 2024, with the rapid rise in the Chapter 78 being in the last 2 years.
No, I think that this, what you call the added details are just very well done. They address so many issues and questions that people have about the school budgets. You know,
Okay.
Yeah.
There's the next section, starting on page 9 in the middle, is about school enrollment, where the
Right.
story isn't the absolute enrollment growth, which is 1 or 2%. It's this English language learners things, which I'm learning more and more about. But the 35% growth last year really, and I don't know I don't think there is a projection for this year yet. But that's a major hit in terms of where the staffing goes. And what was interesting, if you just scroll down to the column chart. Oh, by the way, there is one thing I found that maybe just for the group. Special ed gets extra money from the state. What I understand, Barnstable has an additional program called Crossroads, which they oftentimes lump Crossroads and special ed in terms of what's called students with disabilities, which are kids who need extra help. It could be learning to speak correctly or social skills and other things. That's about 17% of the category. But the thing that we get extra money from the state for is actually only special ed, which is only about 4% of the pupils in the area.
Do we get Crossroads money?
No,
No.
nothing direct.
It's indirect. Do we know how much that is? I'm looking at your chart and
I don't, Mark, you could correct. I can't find any money that we actually get directly for Crossroads, do we?
No, it's the Crossroads was a internally developed program by the Barnstable Public School System to provide students who are on individual education programs or IEPs, specialized services that are more, better for certain types of students and putting them in a residential placement program. We want to keep as many students as we can within the local education system so that they get, more socialization, more classroom experience, and not ship them off to some outside agency. And that's what the Crossroads program really is. The school department can explain it a lot better than I am, but it's an internal program that provides more specialized services for students who have IEPs, but they don't really need to be in an outside residential placement or sent to the Cape Cod Collaborative, for example.
Yeah, I think it's a really valuable program, and to the point, when you look at the numbers, keeping students that are Barnstable students in the school system versus going elsewhere is really helps, I think, the kids, but even more relevant to this, it really helps finances because the money doesn't go out of the system. But the thing that the chart shows is how fast the English language learner population has grown over the last couple of years. The economically disadvantaged actually has flat topped in the last 2 years. So this again could impact things, but it's I thought was good insight for people who might be reading this to understand where the growth is happening in the actual enrolled population.
Yeah, I think this chart is excellent because it shows us visually what is happening.
Yeah, I
If I may-
just wanted to chime, well, Lily, and I agree with you, that chart is outstanding.
It
That
is,
is an-
isn't it?
It's so good. It's so clear. It tells it tells the story. It's right there. And if anyone ever questions, which people do, the amount of money going to the school, I mean, question it no more. It's a beautiful presentation.
I agree. I just would like to chime in that there's a typo in the key to the top of the chart that says Barnstable enrollment. You
Yep.
forgot-
Good catch.
Good catch.
You're not misled by all the different colors.
I'm not
Thank you.
gonna-
No, it's enrollment. Now we've got it wrong.
Yes, but well, I'm not gonna play around with.
Okay,
I'll fix it.
Yes. I'm gonna leave that to Neil.
okay.
Okay, if we go down to the last thing, though, trying to explain
The
how
incremental?
these different categories. If you go to, actually, the link that I sent you, if you look at the, and you really have to look to find this, these are the amounts added to the foundation budget per pupil for these three categories. So every economically disadvantaged pupil, in addition to their base reimbursement that goes into the foundation budget, gets an extra $6,580
Yeah.
that goes into our foundation budget. That's what they think it's going to cost to in addition to the base for an average student. And if you're also an English language learner, you get an extra $2,790, depending on which grade you're in. It varies about $100. And then special education is like $32,000 per person on top of the actual base level.
Yeah.
About
I think that's
25,
invaluable information.
as it notes there at the end there, chapter 78 goes up about 25 to 29% of that amount per pupil, based upon the contribution that the town has to pay itself. So these things then drive the additions to the school staffing. And with Chris's help, we can try to consolidate the 14 pages of data down to what are the major categories, which I appreciate his help doing. But most of it is ELL related, some teaching assistants, some special education liaisons, especially for the economically disadvantaged, and also for the students who their English is a second language at home, which needs extra translations and communications.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, so there were some cost efficiencies, which is something that we need more of. I think there were some reductions, as you can see in the prior chart, of a librarian assistant, and there is active use and solicitation of grants, which are funding next year for FTE and are covering $135,000 worth of supplies and support. More of that would be great, although I have no idea how to do that myself. Planning beyond 2024, there are lots of different things that, I think the one that I was most impressed by was the superintendent, Dr. Ahern, is engaging a consultant to do a demographic forecast to help plan for the future, especially for enrollment trends, the skills they're going to need to have to support the students, and space requirements. Although, having gone through the high school, boy, I can't believe they need more space. I think that's bigger than many of the universities I toured when I was back in the old days. The demographic, I think, will also be helpful in trying to understand Chapter 70, as that becomes such a large piece and is, as we saw, driven by demographics. As for, and I could use people's thoughts and helps on this, as for other challenges that go, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself because I've got a second
you?
screen here.
Okay,
So this was from the general fund information. And I think the takeaway on this is that the fastest growing source of funds is state aid. It was in both in percentage wise and in absolute dollar terms, it was a greater increase in fiscal year 2024. It was in state aid was $6 million versus or about 5.5 versus about 4.5. It's got to be a concern that I'd be very open to people's thoughts, especially Mark's, in terms of, what would be a constructive takeaway from that could be that CFAC could help focus the town and the town council on to ensure that stays so high.
I'm wondering, Neil, if this information about the total state aid, mostly chapter 70, would, and the data that, and the projections that you give, would not be a forceful opening for your report.
Can do, or not, actually, when I was, when I put together my cheat sheet to try to roll these things up, I'm not sure this wouldn't be a good chart up in the front when we talk about general fund.
We could
Yeah, I
do,
was gonna say you might want to move that to the general fund section because it's a good chart.
yeah, it's a good chart.
Revenue section, yeah.
But I think if you mention the importance of state aid to education at the beginning of your report, you basically set the stage for all the things that follow.
Okay.
Because that's the main point we're making.
Yeah, and it's absolutely correct. Good point. I will do that in the second draft.
Yeah.
But if as I can, it's being self-serving, if we can have a chart like this up in the general fund section, which actually could be dollar-wise, as it would. I can shorten it the school section by that amount, obviously. But if we go beyond that, the challenges, I saw 3 key challenges, and I'm not sure these don't somewhat duplicate across many of these things. Obviously, inflation is a big thing. And part of that is general inflation, and part of that is the collective bargaining agreements, because most of the cost increases are in staff. For the school, and I'm not sure again that this is needs to be stated, but obviously we have a lot of competing municipal priorities, and to the degree that depending on how CWMP is funded, among other things, that could put pressure on the amount of dollars that are available to the school. My concern would be if that happens, the debt override doesn't happen, and that puts pressure on the general fund. Will the town need to look at these, the historical 60-40 split? Am I being overly reactionary here?
I'm wondering, I like the challenges. I think you pinpointed them very well. I'm wondering whether you could use this as a conclusion and recommendation, that there are these challenges and you identify them, and maybe you have some suggestions or recommendations for each of these areas.
That's where I fell short. You're right. And I think it might be, I don't know enough about solutions to.
Well, neither do we, but we put it out there anyway.
I'll think about it. And anybody who wants to give me hints as to what they think here or, in
Here,
another open meeting,
only do it here,
I'm
yeah.
open to it.
yeah, but my suggestion, because this is basically summarizing what we're going to face in the future, and you have expressed them so well. I'm wondering whether you can just add your comments and recommendations of what you think we could do. Just a thought.
Yeah.
We can let it, we can leave it as challenges, but you seem
Yeah.
to have such a good handle on it that you have ideas of what might happen. Or what should happen.
Okay.
Okay,
I will.
I was just gonna say, I think those of us who are going to, after this meeting, reread the report in its entirety, not just to put it on Neil, I'll think about, what could we do for, and so.
yeah, if everybody would figure out what we could do, and then the next time we meet, we
Yes.
can trade ideas.
Yes, yep.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
idea.
let me throw this idea out to the committee members just to think about this, because it's great that we're finally seeing some significant increases in state aid to help fund our local operations here, particularly education. But as the community becomes more reliant upon outside sources to fund its ongoing operations, you become more susceptible
Yes.
to economic downturns and in the impacts
Yeah.
of those economic downturns. For example, back in the Great Recession, back in 2008, 2009, there was across the board 20% Chapter 70 cut to all communities. And at that point in time, Barnstable was only getting $7.5 million of Chapter 78. So our reduction was $1.5 million. If that were to happen again during the next, if we do have another recession like that to that degree, and another 20% cut is assigned statewide, that's a $5 million reduction to us now, significantly more. So it's great that you receive outside sources to help fund your ongoing operations, but you become subject to the whims of the legislative process at the state level or the federal level, and what the funding might end up being. That I just wanted to make that point.
I think that is exactly my concern, Mark. We've hit the tipping point where it's not something that Barnstable would be able to control, because the number is just so big now. Okay,
Yeah, if I
something to
can,
think about.
I just wanted to say something on that too. Mark's point is very well taken, beautifully said. I think that's important. I think you have that idea, maybe not as well as he said it in their state aid paragraph, but up to the middle one about the competing priorities, and it goes back to what Mark said. I think from my constituents' point of view and other, people throughout Barnstable, the debt override is a very real concern. And I think that's important to know, that we may have to take care of ourselves. So I like that you have that in there. It should always be there as something to think about. I mean, I think we all did a sigh of relief after the last meeting, but I don't know if that sigh should be, really there. I think it's very important in this report to say that debt overrides are an important part of how we fund our priorities. And, so I just think that's really good to have in there.
Thank you for that.
Yep, thank you. All righty, in the interest of time.
Chris?
You?
Yeah, so DPW, I mean, I followed the format of previous reports here, updated, slightly different table, summarized their priorities, what the department, takes care of across the town. I wanted to wait until we do speak with DPW to get more in depth on specific things. I know probably there's other concerns that different members want to raise. I think Betty said something about lines on some roadways at the last meeting. I don't know if she wants to raise that concern when we speak to the DPW. And we can have things like that after the chart. I left a blank section there for that reason.
May I interject? I am going to have to leave at 10 after.
Okay,
Okay, thank you, Jackie. I think it's the first paragraph is good. I think the report is straightforward, and basically summarizes the operating budget. And as you said, we'll wait to see what, the DPW meeting with us will be next week, and then we can add accordingly. But good job.
Thank you.
the next section, and I assume that Jackie has left. The next section is basically a placeholder. I think Mark had indicated that a lot of the CWP numbers need to be finalized and that there is some degree of restatement. Mark, I'm probably using the wrong phrase, or recategorization here. And so we just have this in here as a placeholder, pending a better picture for both what the numbers are and how they'll be represented in the FY24 budget.
Yes, just a heads up for the committee members. What we're doing with the fiscal year 24 budget is we're going to combine the budget for the comprehensive wastewater management plan operating side of things with the sewer enterprise fund, because it's all sewer. It's all sewer enterprise fund operations. However, the funding source for the expenditures specifically associated with managing the CWMP's implementation are provided for with another revenue source and not sewer user rate charges. So that will be identified in the budget that comes forward for fiscal year 24. So what we'll end up doing is restating the FY23 budget to reflect this change. So we're eliminating a separate appropriation that we used to do for the CWMP,
Right.
combining it with the sewer enterprise fund, but funding it with its own unique revenue source, so as not to impact user rate charges by those costs. And so we'll provide the updated numbers here for this section of the report. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that you'll see that combined with the sewer enterprise fund budget when it comes forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So we essentially had a separate CWMP operating budget for 1 year.
Yes.
Okay,
Where the sewer budget is water pollution control. I never heard of the sewer budget before. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sewer enterprise fund is the water pollution control facility operations on the
Okay.
Versus Way. We also have a small treatment facility out in Marston's Mills at the grade 4-5 school, which we took over, that services not only the school, but a small residential area adjacent to the school. And we have a communal system out at Red Lily Pond area that's provide some services to homeowners in that area as well.
So that's all under water pollution control?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I didn't understand. Thank you.
All right,
okay,
on to police.
okay. Chris, you're up again.
Yeah, so similar to DPW, I updated the numbers, follow the similar format to previous years. We're going to be speaking to the police as well as DPW. So again, I didn't want to get into too many specifics prior to speaking to them. But obviously personnel costs, which is the case in a lot of different departments, that's the primary driver of increases. Operating expenses were slightly lower, and the capital outlay, is similar to previous increases, mostly for equipment and vehicles.
Okay.
And Mark, I guess I should ask, are we good for those two departments in the next meeting?
Yes, I've confirmed with both the chief and Director Santos. They will be here next Monday night.
Excellent, thank you. So Chris, I just left the thing that's highlighted as a placeholder, and there's zero pressure. There's just, it kind of depends on how much space you want to take up with the police and whether you think, whether these things are still appropriate, and if they are, whether you think they're worth including, and that's a TBD
Right.
for the version.
Yep. Yeah, that's fine. And I don't know I mentioned school resource officers in the end there as a possible subject. Is all of that paid for through the police department, or does the school budget affect that at all?
No, they
Oh,
are
okay.
included in the police department's budget. So yeah, they're not in the school budget, in the police department.
Okay.
Yep.
Gotcha.
I think the narrative is really good. Chris, are you planning to put in a chart like they did for the DPW?
I certainly can make that into a chart instead of the 3 points if you think that's more consistent.
Well, whatever you think is clearer. But I
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I followed previous years' formatting. I can make that a chart if you like, so it's more consistent with other sections.
Visually, it breaks things up.
Yeah, I think
You can
that
do it.
way you
I think it'd be great.
yeah, you can see it at a glance.
Yep.
But I think the narrative is very clear. Good job.
Thank you.
All righty, now who the heck wrote the enterprise fund section?
With one hand.
Oh, I know. Heavy thumbs.
Yeah, the one-arm wonder did the enterprise funds. And it's fairly straightforward, as you can see. And I took all of the data from the enterprise fund municipal that Mark sent us recently, and if there are any changes, we'll change those accordingly.
Sounds good.
Any questions or comments?
No, I thought the section read very well. Love the charts.
On the chart, on the one you just scrolled past, there's a typo, there's a couple typos. The Sandy Neck Enterprise fiscal 24. It has a period instead of a comma.
Yeah, I have to, Chuck knows the reason. I had to type this with one hand.
What?
I have only the use of one hand right now. So
I'm
I
sorry.
apologize for those errors.
A heck of a job. Imagine what you could do with two hands, Lillian.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
You know, I did a rack and stack of this data.
You did. I saw that.
Yeah, and you know, the thing that really hit me is the airport. It's such an amazing turnaround. It went from a $3 million loss in 23 to a $900,000 profit in fiscal 24's plan. And then I notice here it talks about an $18 million grant.
Yeah, it was a federal grant that was given out during COVID.
It raised a couple questions, you know, in my mind, which is, I know that, you know, the youth center gets money from the general fund to operate.
Right.
Does the money ever go the other way around from the enterprise to the general fund? I presume.
No, they keep their own surplus.
But we do have an indirect cost model that charges every enterprise fund
Right.
for a portion of the general fund support staff, or the
Mhm.
general fund staff that provides them support. Human resources, IT, finance, town manager, for example. So built into every enterprise fund operating budget is a chargeback that is sent back to the general fund for those support services.
Is there
They
any,
they also pay for their share of our annual pension assessment from the Barnstable
Mhm.
County Retirement System because all their employees belong to
Yeah.
that county retirement system. And other types of costs like property and casualty insurance. Those are all included in the general fund's fixed cost category, but we do an allocation out to the various enterprise funds for their share of those costs and charge them back. And that's about $3.2 million a year in total.
And Mark, I've forgotten, does the Kmart Plaza development have an impact on the enterprise funds financials, or is that a town number?
The lease payments do.
Yes.
The lease payments were renegotiated a few years ago and they were paying $60,000 a year to the airport for leasing the land out there that's underneath buildings. Now that's well over $1 million a year. So there was a significant increase in the lease payments, and those all go to the airport enterprise fund.
Got it. Thank you.
All of those and all the buildings and the land that those buildings sit on are subject to property taxes. Those all go to the general fund.
Got it. That's what it was. Thank you. Yep.
If I may chime in, Chris Clark here.
Sure.
I noticed throughout the document, I think there needs to be a little consistency. I see under the airport enterprise, the last sentence, it is noted that the 18 I believe that's million, right? Dollars in the airport was received, blah, blah, blah. In some places in this document, you have the word million written out. Sometimes you have this capital MM and sometimes you have lowercase mm. So I just thought I'd point out that there are not consistencies within the same document. The same thing with your references to FY, whatever the year is. Sometimes the FY runs into the numbers, sometimes there's a space, and sometimes there's an apostrophe between FY and the year. Just thought I'd let you know.
Thank you for your eagle eyes.
And I will take
appreciate
care
it.
of all those before then everything's finalized.
Thank you. I just thought
Yeah.
it reads more smoothly. Thank you.
Thank
Amen.
you. Any more comments or on the enterprise fund? Okay.
if I might, just a follow-up question. Is there anything, since obviously the town needs more money, is there anything that would keep the town from making money off of the enterprise operations to help fund general fund expenses?
We can't charge user fees above and beyond the cost of the services provided in those enterprise funds. So we can't just increase user charges to enterprise fund participants to pay general fund operating costs unless there's a specific association with that cost. For example, the retirement system, the property and casualty insurance support that they receive from general fund staff. We can't take their money and use it to fund general fund operating costs that are unassociated with that operation.
Okay.
That's a law. Yeah, enterprise fund law.
Yeah, I didn't know what the statute said. Because it seems like they're quite profitable, but certainly the airport can be quite profitable.
Yeah, and the reason why the airport has looked profitable is that $18 million CARES Act grant, which allowed them to charge off any operating expense they incurred to that grant. And so
Is that why the operating expenses went down year to year?
No. From 23 to 24.
Yes.
Yeah, no, jet fuel, the money we're budgeting for the purchase of jet fuel for resale
Yeah.
is less in fiscal year
Oh.
24 than it was in 23.
Got it.
We had a very large supplemental appropriation for jet fuel in fiscal year 23, $3.8 million. And I think that resulted in about an $8 million budget in 23 for jet fuel. We're not budgeting that much in 24 for jet fuel.
Okay.
I think the cost of acquisition for jet fuel has gone down, so they don't need as much. But it's very volatile. They may be coming every year for pretty much almost every year for the past several years. They've come forward with a supplemental appropriation request because they run out of money to purchase jet fuel. But they turn around and they sell it with a markup. So they make the money back. And so it ends up being a profitable activity for them because they're marking every gallon up that they sell over the price they purchase it for.
All right.
So.
Thank you, Larry. Oh,
Just one more question in that area. So for instance, Sandy Neck, which I presume most of that revenue comes from, well, I don't know, but does it mostly come from tourism?
It comes from the sale of off-road vehicle stickers.
Yeah,
For people who drive their vehicles out in the outer beach, as well as parking revenues generated for the main parking lot above, and cottage leases, and beach sticker portion. They get allocated a portion of the beach sticker sales, residential beach sticker sales. But a majority of it comes from the off-road vehicle sales, and a lot of that is out of towners.
yeah,
Not just residents. I think residents pay, I think it's $95 for a Barnstable resident for an ORV sticker and $180 for a non-resident. And there's a lot of non-residents who pay the $180 to spend a day or two out there with their family when they come down.
yeah. Right. And so, you know, one might in a capitalistic mode say, well, is that, so those aren't constrained by, I'm just thinking of the user fees, the statute applies to Sandy Neck as well. You're not allowed to really make money on that.
Yep.
Oh,
And they have a capital program out there. We're still paying debt
Yes.
service for the new bathhouse that we built about 10
Yep.
years ago. And we have a major project coming forward in the near
I
future.
noticed that.
For relocating the gatehouse and the access road, which I don't think they may have trouble affording the debt service on that large capital project under their current rate structure. So they may have to go up on those fees just to cover the new loan payment, unless we can secure some federal or state grant funds to help offset a portion of that capital cost.
Okay, thanks for letting me go off in that direction.
Sure. Well, good question.
Helpful.
I should say they did restructure their fees significantly, leaning more heavily on the out-of-town users.
Yeah, makes sense.
all righty.
This is fixed cost, and I wrote that, and I'll answer any questions.
Where did the what are these revenues? I didn't understand that.
Excuse me?
I didn't understand the revenues. Aren't these aren't the fixed costs funded by general fund? I was totally confused.
Yes. The general fund, the fixed costs are taken out of the general fund before the net amount, the net revenue is used for the municipal and school budgets.
Right,
So
I was confused by
so
the,
you figure out all the costs that are, yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, please go on.
So you figure out all the expenditures that are in the fixed costs, and then the revenue is to offset that. And it comes from the general fund total. Let's say we have $197 million general fund, and the expenditures for the fixed costs are estimated to be 64 million. So we just take 64 million out of the general fund immediately.
think what might be helpful here, Lillian, for Neil and others, is that we show what the source of funding is for these fixed costs, which includes things like property taxes, some unrestricted general government state aid, some enterprise fund reimbursements.
Right.
There's about 6 different categories of sources of funding that provides the funding for the $60 million of fixed costs. And I think maybe a table that shows what that is, what those sources are, would be helpful.
Okay,
I can provide that to you.
okay, thank you.
I guess what confused me as well is, so there's, under the subtitle of revenue, it shows fiscal year 2023 as 61.8 million. And then the next expenditures was 69.7 million. Are those supposed to be different?
No,
they
they should agree, and I'll
They should be agreeable.
Okay,
I'll
Maybe I
provide you the
didn't,
table.
yeah, I think I didn't readjust the 23. No, they should match up.
yeah, okay. I couldn't do this well with one hand either.
And half a brain. Okay,
What did you do to your other hand, if I may be so personal?
I just had surgery on it on Friday.
Oh,
Yeah.
so you're on painkillers too, probably.
Well, I've got this hand that looks like a bunch of bananas. The little fingers are not working real well.
Oh, sorry.
No, it had to be done.
Bad timing too.
Well, there's never good timing for that.
Hmm.
So I think that Mark's idea about showing the various sources for the revenue is a good one. It will clarify where we get our money for the fixed costs. It'll make it clearer.
Okay,
Any other suggestions for tweaking it? Okay,
all right.
all right.
Looking ahead,
Uh-huh.
I kept the format largely the same. Mark confirmed the CWMP revenue sources have remained constant. I have to, the one thing I wanted to ask about, Mark, was we included the property tax override referendum mechanics last year in the document and said, if we want to do this, here's kind of the timetable. All I've done is taken that and updated it. But I have a broader question about, do we want to repeat that same what if scenario, or is it redundant since we explained the process last year? It's this paragraph. Whoops. Anything.
I thought that we have enough resources that we don't need to have the referendum for a couple of years.
That's correct. Yeah, the presentation we provided to the council.
So we need to readjust
I
that
would remove
portion
it.
of it. Yeah,
Well, I know how to do that, I think.
okay.
Perhaps can I suggest that a reference be made that says why it's taken out? If last year you conveyed to the public that there was this looming strategy that, thanks to a change in financing, and that's good news, as Mark told us, that at this time there is not a recommendation.
Pressing need to,
Yeah, or not a recommendation that there's a looming consideration for override or something like that.
Okay,
Yeah, and you might want to say it's not needed at this time, but maybe in the future, after so many years.
well, it's gonna have to happen at some point.
Right.
but you might want to say why. And Mark's explanation to the council was very helpful and
Yeah.
welcome news. And I think it would be embraced by the public to hear that.
I think so.
Okay, Mark, if it's okay with you, I'll take a shot at that and then I'll let you wordsmith it to make sure what we write is consistent with what you've told the council.
Okay.
Okay,
You know, one of the, if I might comment, one of the things that I took away going through this whole thing is water is going to kind of drown the budget. And I mean water in the big sense. When you look at water pollution control with the sewers, the water supply and CWMP together, all under the rubric of water, they're huge. I mean, there's like, what, $60 million of capital going to go into water supply in the next 3-4 years, or that's what the plan was. Somehow there's a big idea here, even if CWMP isn't going to kill us next year.
Yeah, I mean, clean water is also a significant issue for the town.
Yeah.
You know, we need clean drinking water, and, you know, our capital plan does include some significant expansion with treatment facilities
Yes.
for the public water system. And, you know, our plan is to, like with the sewer expansion, submit those projects to the state revolving loan fund for financing them, you know, at low interest rates and possibly subsidies as well. But the cost will be reflected in future user rate charge increases that we will have to implement.
Yeah, and I don't think those even include the forever chemical treatments yet, right?
Not yet.
Yeah, and those could be substantial. So I think that at some point in time, CFAC ought to raise, you know, it may not be something we're going to have to worry about in fiscal 24, hopefully, as Mark has laid out for the town council. But it seems like if in looking ahead, where I think a lot of the stuff in the school would fit in this area too, I think CFAC might want to consider raising the issue of clean water, both coming in and going out, is an important issue, and maybe we can think of some ideas to how to help that.
I think that's a good idea. I know that it's very relevant in my precinct in West Barnstable, where they're looking for new sources of potential municipal water.
Hmm.
Well, CFAC will be happy to research it and take a position on it when we receive a request from either the town manager or town council. Chris?
good point. And the last sentence is just thank you to Mark. And I don't know, Mark, if I left anyone out.
No, that's appropriate.
Yeah, I think school department staff have been
Absolutely.
fantastic in helping
Oh,
us.
yeah.
Yeah,
Responding
definitely.
to questions. So Superintendent Ahern and Deputy Finance Director Chris Dwelly in particular.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments for tonight? What I will do is I'll do another wordsmithing thing here and try to go through and some of the comments that were made that are good ones. Make sure there's consistent formatting, make sure that the way we describe millions or fiscal year are consistent. But there will be a, you know, semi-substantial rewrite, I imagine, after the interviews on the 24th. I'll try to get something out either before that or just after it so that we can have something to use for our next meeting. I thought I was going to say something else, but I've forgotten. But I will get that out to I will get that out to all the committee members, you know, by next week at the latest.
I just have a question because Mark indicated that the CWMP operating budget is being incorporated into the Water Pollution Control Enterprise Fund budget. So should there be a section still on the CWMP? Or maybe there could just be a caveat saying that this budget has been incorporated.
It's probably helpful to say that there's been a change in the accounting.
Yeah,
Well,
so
that-
we don't really need a section on CWMP other than an explanation that it has been incorporated into the water pollution control. Is my understanding correct? Okay,
It's being incorporated, so.
is
and
being
those-
incorporated.
Yep.
Yeah, so that means that Jackie doesn't have to do anything except a couple of sentences.
Okay.
So after our April 24th meeting with the DPW and police, Chris is going to adjust his draft and submit it to you. And then Mark is going to get us all the updated data that we've asked for. So we'll leave it to you, Chuck, to figure out when we're going to meet again.
Yes, on that note, Mark, I've asked this before, and I'm not doing this to test you. I'm just making sure that we're all on the same page. Kind of working backwards, the drop dead date for us to submit this would be on or about.
On
Uh,
or about
It
May
was,
15th.
oh,
May
we got,
15th.
we can do that.
Yes. And
Yeah,
so,
we're gonna submit the budget to the town council on May 7th. Or May 9th, May 9th.
all right,
So we got a week after that, CPAC's report.
Will there be hard copies of the town manager's proposed budget?
Oh, yes, anybody who wants a hard copy, let me know. We do plan on printing books, as we have done in past years. We're also gonna prepare a summary budget document like we have in past years.
All right,
That's about 50 to 60 pages long. In addition to the regular 500-page document.
okay,
And of course, afterwards, this summer, CFAC will work on your report that summarizes that budget document into about a 12-page report.
right.
all right, so last thing on my agenda for tonight. So working backwards. Report due the 15th. CFAC meeting before that is May 8th. I assume that's the one where we will present it to the full CFAC for their comment, kind of final tweaking. So our next subcommittee meeting will probably be the week of May 1st. Because we're going to need time on the one end to give everybody a chance to reread, especially after Chris rewrites his sections, but we need to leave enough time so that any changes we make between draft 2 and draft 3 can be finalized and distributed in advance of the May 8th meeting. Am I thinking about this correctly?
So you think that we should meet that first week in May to come up with our final draft and send it out in time for the membership on the 8th, the full CFAC member on the 8th?
Right. I mean,
Yeah,
let's
that makes sense.
just for, round numbers, let's say we met on Monday, May 1st as a subcommittee.
Mhm.
We offered our kind of final the semifinal draft comments. I get those done by Wednesday or Thursdays. I assume I send it out to the full committee, so they have a few days to read it before we discuss it on the 8th.
That sounds logical.
Okay.
So do you want to set it for the 1st?
Yeah, Mark, can we do that here now, just so you have a date and we meet all the announcement requirements?
Sure. So next meeting, May 1st,
May 1st, 6 o'clock.
okay?
Thank you.
And that should parse out nicely time. All right. Excellent. If there's nothing else, it's been a great, appreciate your, almost 2 hours of your time tonight, but very helpful. And thanks again to everybody for all the time you took to put these sections together.
And thank you for coordinating everything.
Thank you for your hard work.
And
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank Chris and Betty for your input. That's very valuable for us.
Amen.
Yeah, we need you. Thank you.
All right. So we'll see everybody Monday at the regular meeting.
Okay.